This is one of the hardest decisions in bass fishing, stay or go. Do you grind it out and max out fish that you found, or leave and start over, hoping for something better? Over 2 days, I made both work, but it was never easy. Here's what really happens on the water, and the stuff you only learn by living it. So anytime you turn on a fishing video or watch live tournament coverage, it looks like guys are just pulling up and catching them. We know the truth behind it, though. There's actually tons of dead time, and the catching is really a small part of the day. So I want to pull back the curtain a little bit in today's video, and I'm going to show you the time and the frustration, how hopeless it can feel before you find them, and then once you do find fish, the inner debate that you have and just the uncertainty of just trying to decide, do I stay on these fish? Do I go? Let me take you through some actual fishing, show you some footage of the good and the bad and the ugly. So to help find fish, I have a couple rules of thumb. If I've been to a lake or a river before, I'm going to go to spots where at that same time of the year, I've caught fish in the past. Those are confidence spots. I know what's kind of worked here. I know there's a decent population of fish, or at least there has been in the past. I'm going to fish through there pretty quickly. I'm not going to camp there all day, but I'm going to go check those. If there are shallow laydowns where I've caught them on, say, a jig before, or lily pad patches where I've caught fish on a frog before, I'm going to go check those, get a pulse. That gives me a little confidence going in, and hopefully it's something similar. A lot of times it's not, but at least it gives you an idea, hey, are things similar to how they were before, or do they seem a lot different? And then if I've never been to a place before, what I'm going to do is try to find something similar to it. And if it's say it's a shallow grassy lake or something, I'm going to think about other grassy lakes that time of year, what's worked there. I'm going to try things that have worked in the past, basically seasonal patterns that seem to work. In the summertime, I know they'll bite a frog in lily pads. If it's pre-spawn, if there's shallow grass, I know I can throw a bladed jig or a lipless crankbait around there. If it's the fall, maybe the backs of creeks where I find shad, I can go take a square bill back there. So I'm going to use those basic rules of thumb. So basically, to summarize that, it's where you've caught them before or where they should be. And a lot of times, guess what? They live in those same places, or where they should be is in fact where they are. But a lot of times, guess what? You've seen this one, they're nowhere to be found. You try your favorite old spots, you try what they should be doing, don't even have a bite. What do you do then? So at this point, you have two options. You can just keep on doing it, be hard-headed and say, I'm going to fish spots where I know they live, or I know they should be doing this, and I'm going to find a spot somewhere in the lake where they're doing it. Sometimes that works out. The fish are in those spots, or if you just fish enough of the right type water, you'll find a spot where they're at. A lot of times, though, that's how we really go down in flames. What I try to do at this point is say, I'm going to pretend I've never fished here or I've never fished at all, and I'm going to forget all the rules. I'm just going to start trying everything. Now, that probably sounds a little illogical, and maybe it is, but the thing is, I think you need to stop thinking where they should be at this point and just start fishing. Doesn't matter if it's cold and the water's muddy there, they shouldn't be there. Well, you better check it. Or it's summertime and it's bright, so they should be in the shade and not out in the sunny stuff, or they should be deeper. Just start checking stuff. At this point, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on anything, but I'm going to just start trying as many options as possible. Couple docks over there, let's go check those. A spot with current, let's try that. Let's try something a little bit deeper, a little bit shallower. Let's try some pads, let's try some grass, let's try some rock, some wood. You get the picture. Let's just start sampling pretty quickly and trying a variety of things, as many different things as possible. Sooner or later, you're going to hit on what's working. So you can see that I have a rain jacket off starting off the day. Actually, it was kind of a cool morning and some showers in the area that kind of blew out with big storms coming in the evening. But throwing a frog and a swim jig, a bladed jig some, and also pulling a general over the top of this stuff. But really trying to cover water, try stuff that's a little more matted, a little more open, some places with current and places with some deeper water next to it, and really just covering water, trying to find some. The big thing here, you can see I'm covering a lot of water. It's just tough to find clear water, and it seemed like there was so much water that I was in search of clear water, but even when I found that, not finding a lot of fish around it. Now, I've been to this section of the river a number of times, and these are areas where I've caught them well in the past, and had heard from a couple buddies they were actually biting in there, and I just, with the changing conditions, with it getting more muddy, I couldn't get bit in there, and I was starting to get frustrated with that. And, these are places where I've just always caught them, but lo and behold, they weren't there. So here's one more thing that'll help you out on that too. You don't want to just randomly try lures. I do have a playlist and it's down in the description called My Simple 7. Basically, I run with 7 major categories of baits. I try to keep a limited selection out there, stuff that I have confidence in, know that it'll work in all situations, and I don't sample a lot between changing colors of baits and different styles of baits. I have some basic ones out there. They're either going to bite those or not. So I'm going to keep that simple, and that helps me keep my confidence up while I'm doing that. Now, I'd already been here a couple days and I've been catching a few fish. So I went back to the area at this point where I'd caught them pretty good. It was some nice clear water. The fish were in the kind of the whole general area, but the mud had crept in there and it was a lot different. And I went to check that. You can see I hook up with a couple here, but I could grind through them and catch some. And I knew that if I just sat there all day, I could probably catch some fish, but they weren't really biting that well. And, they weren't the big ones. It was a lot tougher. And at that point, you make a call, it's stay or go. So I thought, there's a front coming in. I need to go where there's fresher fish and actually go look for some. This is a day where they should be biting. And sooner or later, even though they weren't where I expected them, where they had been in the past, if I put my head down, I felt like sooner or later, I'm going to run into some fish. So I grind through a couple here, but then decide pretty quickly it's time to pick up and look for some new water. Now, I did look for areas that were somewhat close to where I had been catching them, and I hadn't caught them in these spots before, but I looked for spots where there were current breaks. This is on a river system, so there's a lot of current there coming on the points and where current divides, some steeper cut banks where they can get right up against it. I start covering water pretty fast here. Throwing again the bladed jig, the swim jig. I'm on the look for them and trying to not spend too much time at any spot, just keep an open mind and just cover water until I run into them. So I could have turned this into a really, really long video because between all the dead time in the morning when I didn't catch them and then this period after I went fished my confidence spot, my confidence was shaken. I was starting to get frustrated. So it's easy to do one of two things. One, you either quit and just say, well, I'm done for the day or whatever. You just mail it in. You just don't fish well the rest of the day or just call it a day. Or you go head back to that spot where I only got a couple bites and say, well, I just have confidence that they're here. And then you catch a few there. And if it's a tournament, you don't get that good of results. You don't get a limit or they're small ones. You really have to stick with it. But you can't see it here, but my frustration level at this point, you just feel so helpless. And it's always been this way. It's like up until you catch them, it feels like, man, I'm never going to get another one. You have these high expectations. This should work. It's not working. It's really natural, but you just have to keep on going. And when it finally turns around, it's not that much different than other stuff that you fish. It's literally a matter of experimenting and experimenting. Just keep on trying things. And sooner or later, you run into a little stretch where the water's a little clearer, a little warmer, a little cooler. The wind's blowing on it just right. The clouds, a couple clouds pass through for a few minutes. Something's just a little different. And sometimes it's like that. And all of a sudden you figure it out. And one small change or one clue, all of a sudden you catch them for the rest of the day. Other times you just figure it out for a small period, but that 5 to 20 minute bite window, that makes a whole day. So the best advice I can give you at this point, and you're going to see, just sticking with it. Don't overthink it. Just keep on fishing. Use the key baits. Keep on trying likely areas. Sooner or later you connect, and all of a sudden it just happens. So I'm throwing a swim jig in mud here, and finally I hit a little bit clear water. It changed there. I find this little section, and there's little mats on it. Get a bite on the surface, kind of a weak bite, but then it pulls really hard. I see it's a good one. End up losing him because I'm not half expecting it, and work down a little bit farther, and then the mat gets a little thicker. Now I go to a frog and the general, start pulling that on top, and all of a sudden it's this clear little pocket where the water's dropping. There's kind of a backwater area right there. And sure enough, the fish are loaded up right here. It's one little isolated spot where there's clear water and water's pulling out of backwater. And man, they are loaded in here. You see the old general right there. I missed one on a frog, went back with that general. He's caught up in there, tangled in that thick stuff, and I go to pulling on him pretty good. That water, it's one of those that it's the perfect little spot, and these are big ones for this area. And that little drain there. It's just with the conditions that day, they've probably been in that backwater lake. There's a ton of current out front, and it's the clear water pulling out. And right where the muddy water met that clear with that little bit of mat, man, they were stacked up in there. Now I end up missing a few of these, losing a few of these. If I catch all of them, if it's in a tournament, these are tournament money fish, maybe even winning fish. These are pretty good fish for the area there. And if I land all those in a tournament, I would have done really well. If I was in the tournament, I also would have been pretty upset that I wasn't landing them all. But it's one of those that all of a sudden, if I would have sat at the spot I was at before, when it went down in flames and hardly caught anything, but I keep moving like this, you run into better ones. And it just, like I said, all of a sudden it just happens. There's not a whole lot of rhyme or reason. And then as quickly as it starts, it's over. It's one of those that you don't see, there's no playbook or you can't call your shot on this. It's like on this particular day, the water got right and they were there. And then I tried to expand it into that backwater lake. You can see all this in the backwater. It looks like it should be perfect, and there should be more fish back here. It's clear. It's got the same cover and everything. When I first pushed into here, I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, they're just going to be loaded in here. And then I do hook a great big one. Unfortunately, it was a grinnell or a bowfin or dogfish, as they call them up there. So not long after that, great big storms rolled in. I had to get the heck out of there. But the big takeaway I want you to see on this, I caught tournament winning level fish out of a spot when I had struggled all day. And it was not because of my skill or a secret bait. There were probably 35 times during the day where I said, I've caught him here. I'm going to try this. That looks perfect. I'll bet you $1 I can catch one on a spinnerbait here, or a jig's going to be perfect over there. Guess what? I was wrong like 35 times in a row. But that 36th time, just because I stuck with it and kept on trying, kept on making casts to spots that were likely and didn't spend a whole bunch of time in any one spot, just kept on moving. Eventually, I ran into them. And that's the best thing you can do when you're not catching them is stop thinking, speed up a little bit, try a bunch of likely spots. Sooner or later, it's going to click. And when you find them, it has the potential to be really good, either in a really hot spot or figuring out the pattern where you can run it all over the lake. Now, the next day was post-frontal. The wind had laid down, air had dried out, storms went through. But the day before, obviously, I caught them where that clear water was coming out of backwater lakes. And I did what any good fisherman would do. I said, well, that's probably a likely spot. Let me try other little backwater lakes, see if I can find places where there's clear water coming out of them and replicate what I caught them on yesterday, do that same pattern. Problem was, now today, the water was coming back up. Instead of dropping out, it was actually coming up. So then I tried to expand and said, well, let me push back farther into these areas. Maybe they're, instead of pulling out of the backwaters, maybe they're pushing back in, and covered a lot of water doing that and just was not going. I ran like 5 or 6 different areas and again, tried to do what I thought they should do, but they weren't doing it. Get back in another little draw coming out of one of these places and catch one and miss another one, but you can see it's just a little rat gear. It's not good ones. Now, by this point, time is starting to run short. I spent a number of hours in like 5 or 6 really good looking spots here, trying where water was coming in, those little alleyways, plus the backwater lakes. The water was coming up and muddying up so many areas. So at this point, instead of doing the go strategy where you go and look for new water, at this point, there was very little clear water. And I thought, with the few remaining minutes that I had left in my trip, let's go ahead and go to somewhere where there is clean water, where I have been catching them, and try that stay strategy. Now, at this point, I'd already caught some fish in the area. I knew the general area where they were at. But at this point, when I was going to do the stay strategy, I went to a finesse bait. It's that Berkeley General, which I use as a finesse frog. I've done a whole video on that. You can look in the description. I'll put a link to that one as well, talking about how I finesse fish that in the same frog water. Because anytime you're fishing behind yourself after a while, you want to go more finesse-y or change it up. And then the other thing is, when you're in an area and working it over, I really started to pay attention to what the exact sweet spots were. In this area, there were a few weed clumps, patches where the fish consistently seemed to be. So I started making a regular lap around these key areas, fishing a bait through there, making repeated casts, just casting over and over, paying a lot of attention to my angle, working the bait really slowly, and then trying to be as stealthy and quiet as possible. So I'd get in an area, just drop my power poles, not run the trolling motor. I had my graphs off and stuff. I'm just being really quiet, even trying not to rock the boat or make any noise, and just cast after cast, going slower with the bait and just grind out fish. And sure enough, paying attention to those details, I was able to catch some pretty good ones. So I moved back to the area where I've been catching them in the pads and had that good clear water. As soon as I get that, while I'm moving at this point, I'm moving into the area, drop the power poles right away. And you'll notice most of the rest of the clips, then I'm full down and basically just keep on getting these key little patches. It's amazing how these key ones would reload, and you see familiar little groups of pads with the duckwort and that mat over them. But I keep catching fish from different angles in these same few clumps over and over. Oh, how's that for some fancy frogging? Shark attack. You notice that the fish, yeah, I'm fishing slowly, pull down, and working really thoroughly, but when they decide to strike, man, it's vicious. They're still there, you just have to slow down. Just keep in mind here, you see the poles going down again, but you're not seeing all the casts that I make in between these, so I'm just throwing cast and cast and cast to these same spots, same key spots over and over. And sooner or later, if you put in those key spots, they're there. And when they bite it, man, they go after it. Your mind and your experience can be a big help when you're fishing, especially deciding whether to stay or go and finding where they should be at. But when that's not working, where you've caught it before isn't working, it's time to stop thinking and just go fishing. Fish stuff that looks good, try lures you have confidence in. Sooner or later, you'll figure it out. Here's more videos to show you exactly how I caught them today and how to catch fish when the bite gets tough.